Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. Today I have a fun one for you. We are going to be foiling some wooden tags. Now the majority of the time when I foil on cardstock and I put it through my laminator. But I found these tags at Michael's. They're only about 25, maybe 50 cents a piece. I don't know. They're super cheap, but they're little thin wooden tags that you can attach to gifts or hang them off bags, or you can add them to cards themselves. But I thought they were super cute and I wanted to try foiling on them. So the first thing I need to do is go ahead and take the tags off all the backs of them, and then I'm painting them. Now to paint these, I am using some cheap craft paints. These are just acrylic paints, and I'll paint them each a different color. Now I'm using the Craft Smart brand from Michael's. You can get these on sale for really, really cheap if you find them at the right time. And they're a nice little paint. They're pretty watered down, so you need a few coats. However, it just takes a little bit of time, and acrylic paints dry super fast, so it goes by pretty quickly. I also like to use a foam brush. You can also use like a nicely packed, dense paintbrush to put on this paint. It's up to you, whatever works best for you. And I just go in super thin coats and paint over the entire tag. The one thing you don't want to forget is all the little edges. So just use your foam brush to go over each one of those edges. You can kind of pass back and forth over it, or you can just pounce up and down to get the paint on those edges. Now on my first tag, my oval one, I went with white, just plain white. And then on my rectangle tag, I'm going to go with a nice like buttercream vanilla color. Now, if you're doing a set of tags like for Christmas, of course, you're not going to have to switch colors so much. You can just go with one color on each of the tags, but I wanted to show you a few different options and just some different color combinations and have some fun and play around with this. On my third tag, this already has a little hole in the top, and I will be using red paint on it. I'm also using a brush for this. This is a little bit thicker of a paint. It's a little bit older, so I am using a brush to put this on. It just works better. The brush is also going to allow me to get inside that hole and paint the wood inside of it, and that just helps to get in those little nooks and crannies. So the tags I'm working on now, like I said, already have the holes in the top. So these are really nice to add a ribbon through or whatever. The ones on the right are more of a plaque. You can easily just add these onto a gift with some adhesive, or you can just use removable adhesive as well, and then you can reuse the tags, or you can just use a drill and a little bit. These aren't very thick, so it doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to put your own little hole in these as well. Now my final tag that I'm working on here, I'm going in with the nice dark gray. I don't show it on camera because it would take forever, but I did do both sides of the tags and I did several layers. I also did the edges, so just don't forget those. Once your tags are dry, you can see I let mine dry overnight. My nail polish color has changed. Sorry about that, but a little jump in the video. But now it's time to do the foiling, or get ready for the foiling, I should say. To apply the foil, I am going to need some sort of surface that the foil can stick to. I'll be using the hot foil gel from the Crafter's Workshop. I'm also going to be using the Deco Foils. That is what works with this gel. Now, if you do not have the hot foil gel, you can also use the tacky when dry gel medium. That will work with this foil as well, but it's two different mediums. This is going to be what you use with the heat. If you don't want to use the heat, you can use the tacky when dry. It's just going to be more of a distressed look. So if you want to and you don't want to use the heat, give that a shot. But I wanted to show you a way where you can use that heat and get a nice shiny finish. So for my first tag, I'm going to be using this stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. And just to get the placement right, I'm taping it down from the back. You definitely do not have to do this. I didn't do it on any of my other ones, but I just wanted that hole to be covered up with one of the circles in the stencil. So that's why I taped it into place. Now with my palette knife, I'm just going to smooth through some of the hot foil gel. Now the trick with this is you want to get as smooth of a layer as possible. So take your time, just put it through, and again, smooth as possible and smooth it out. Remove any of that excess. You don't want any major bumps or lumps in this gel. And it doesn't take a whole lot of this. So smooth it on, and then whatever you have left over, just swipe back into the jar with your palette knife. If you don't have a palette knife, you can always use an old credit card or gift card. You can even try to use really any kind of plastic that has a straight edge on it will work for this. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove this stencil, and you can see I have some buildup around the edges. You can take your finger and just wipe that off. I'm putting it back in the jar, or you can use your palette knife and scrape along the edges. It really is up to you. You just don't want to leave those big chunks on the side. Now for my second stencil, I am using this one again from the Crafters Workshop. I've used this stencil before to do some gilding with gilding flakes through my stencil. I will leave that video linked down below. This is a beautiful stencil to work with, especially this time of year. Now for this, I'm going on that cream tag that I made, and I'm again just smoothing that gel through with my palette knife, making sure I get a nice smooth layer. Now once I have it all the way on, I'm going to take my palette knife and run it along those edges to remove all the kind of overhang. My third one that I am working on is the gray tag, and for this I'm using the snowfall stencil. Now these two, this one and then the very first stencil I used from the Crafters Workshop, you can see these have the little tab on the edge. That is because these that I have here are cake and cookie stencils. These are meant to be used in your kitchen. Once you bring them to your craft room, if you do, don't take them back into your kitchen. But they are made from food-safe plastic. Now, these come in not only this type of stencil, but you can also get them in just a regular 6x6 form. I will leave both of those linked down below. I just happen to have the cake and cookie ones. I'm not a baker, never have been. I'm not good at it, and I'm not good at decorating. Very good at all, but I just like to use these in my craft room. They work just as well. Now, for my fourth tag, I am going to be working on my white oval. Now, the rest of the tags I kind of did like a more Christmassy theme, but this can be used for anything. So this one I wanted to go more birthday with it. I went ahead and masked off the top of this tag with just some masking tape, painter's tape, whatever you have on hand, just a nice straight line. Then I'll use this stencil and just stencil the bottom of this tag. I love this stencil. It's nice and intricate, but again, just smooth that gel through, make it as smooth as possible. Now here, before it dries, you do want to go ahead and remove that masking tape. This can kind of glue things down once it's set, the gel. So just remove that masking tape while it's still wet and let everything dry. Now the great thing about this gel, it goes on white, but when it dries, it's clear, so you know when it's ready. For my foil today, I am using Deco Foil for all of my for all of my tags. And the majority of the time, when I'm foiling, I would get out my laminator, but these are too thick to go through my laminator, so I needed to find another way to press the heat onto these. So I pulled out my iron. Now, this is not an iron that I keep in my craft room. I don't iron clothes very often, to be quite honest. So I use it everywhere. This is just my main iron that I have. It doesn't get gunky with this as long as you don't put it directly on the gel. What you want to do is take your foil. This is a great way to use up those little extra bits and pieces. So you can see I have a pretty small piece here. You just want it to cover up your tag. I'll go ahead and lay that foil shiny side up, pretty side up, and then the dull side facing that gel. I'll put a piece of parchment paper over the top of that. That's just going to create a nice slick surface so it doesn't burnish that foil and make it a little dull looking. It's going to keep it nice and shiny. Then I can take my iron, start off low. You can always go hotter. I start off low, and if it's a little bit too cool, I'll bump up the heat. You don't want any steam, you don't want any wet, you just want a nice, dry, hot iron. And just start rubbing over. Now, as you're doing this, you can feel it, and you can see it through the foil when it's starting to get ready. Now, you'll see when I take this off, it's not going to be perfect. That's okay, because as I remove this and you have those little areas where the foil just isn't on there, you can go back in and use all those little bits and pieces that are still left on the foil and just keep reusing. Place it right over the spot where you need it and use the tip of your iron to press it right into there. You can also use your finger while it's still a little warm and just give it a good rub to burnish it in, and that's going to help cover up all those little areas that maybe you missed the first time. You can also go back in with the edge or the little tip of the iron and go into those snowflakes, especially some fine details like this, and go around the edges to get those edges and make sure they're nice and covered with the foil. Something I found later on as I'm doing this, as it's still warm and the foil is still on there, use your finger to kind of press in that foil and really burnish it. Give it a good stick onto the gel, and it's going to give a lot better results. You'll see that later on in this video. But as I'm working, I'm just covering up all those little spots that were missed, and there, once I'm happy with it, I've got this beautiful foiled tag ready to go. It's super easy, and you don't need a ton of supplies. Now, I love this one. I did more of a tone on tone with that gray paint, the acrylic paint, and then on top of that, I put the pewter foil. So it really is a nice tone on tone look, but you still get that shine. So it's so pretty. Now on my next tag, I will be using my rectangle tag that I made with the little pine cones and branches, and then I'll be using the amber watercolor foil. Now again, this is a great way to use up those little leftover pieces that you may have. You can see I'm using them here. And this is just like, it's got some silver, some gold, some bronzy and coppery colors in there, and it's really like a true watercolor look on your foil. It's really, really pretty. For this, I wanted to go ahead and just put the foil, again, dull side facing the gel, shiny side up, and just start rubbing over the top. My iron is nice and warm now. I've got it the right temperature. And you can also see I'm working with a towel underneath. That's just to protect my work surface so I don't melt my cutting mat. So make sure whatever you're working on is heat safe because it does transfer some heat down there. I'm just going to continue to go through with my iron. Now for this one, I left the parchment paper off a little bit. That did help, but it does create a little bit of a rougher surface, not as smooth to iron over. But again, it works either way. If you want that smooth surface to iron over, use your parchment paper. Or if you think the heat is going to be too much at first, put your parchment paper over it. And then as you get more comfortable with it, you can remove that and go in and get all those little details with the tip of your iron. Now here's the deal with this technique. Even after all of this, you still are not going to get a perfect foil with this technique. It is going to be a little bit of a more distressed look. You can see I've still got some pieces missing here, but it's so pretty nonetheless. So just total disclosure there, on all of my tags that I made, I did not get a perfect foiled look anytime I did this. So if that's going to bother you, this isn't the technique for you. Just a little forewarning. I'm going to move on to the red tag now, and I'm going in with some gold foil. And for this one, I went straight in without the parchment paper over the top of it. Now, one thing I want to mention, I am using parchment paper, not wax paper. Use parchment paper. That's what's going to work here. When I was very new to cooking and just married, I thought parchment paper and wax paper were the same thing. They are not. I know that now, but you know, if you're like me and young and you don't know, well, now you do. They're not the same thing. It will burn, it will smell, it will smoke, and you'll think you're starting a fire. So don't use it. Now I'm going to go ahead and just go right over those little pieces that I missed with my extra little foil bits on the side there, and using the tip of the iron just to get into all those little nooks and crannies here. Now there is a closer look at this one. This one's so pretty. It's nice and shiny and gold. Again, you get more of that distressed look. Just because of the technique you're using. It's not going to be perfect, but it's beautiful nonetheless. Now, my final one that I'm going to do here is my absolute favorite. As you do more of these, you get a little bit more used to the feel of it. And this is where I kind of discovered that while it's still warm, if you burnish over it with your finger, make sure it's not hot. You don't want to burn yourself. But while it's still warm, burnish over it with your finger and you'll get a much better result. Now for this, I'm using the rainbow foil and I'm doing it on that white tag that I masked off at the top. I put the parchment paper over this one and I'll just start rubbing around with my iron, making sure I get all those edges, just really kind of getting in there with the tip of it as well, and just smooth, nice back and forth motions. Now while it's still warm, not hot, give it a minute just to cool off a little bit, and then rub over it with your finger once it gets cool enough to touch. Now this is going to burnish it in to all those little warm areas, kind of like when your laminator rolls over it. So you're just using your finger like the laminator roller. But once you feel it's cold, then you can go ahead and peel off your foil, and look at that. This one is by far my favorite. It's just so, so pretty. Now for this one, I did end up stamping on the top of that. You can stamp on these if you want to stamp a to and from. I stamped celebrate on this one and make them customizable. You can even stamp somebody's name with a um, alphabet stamp set on the top as well and really customize it. You just want to make sure that you use the right ink. And that is going to be a permanent ink. You don't want this to you don't want to dye ink per se to where it's going to bleed into the pores of the wood. So here I'm using Stays On pigment, regular Stays On. Someone who watches my videos also recommends a lot of times the Ranger archival inks that are permanent inks that work really well on non-porous surfaces as well, and they have a lot of great colors. So whatever you have on hand, you just want a permanent ink that's going to sit there and not bleed into your wood. You can even test that out on a little small sample of wood as well. That's going to do it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and a look at how you can foil on wood tags. A little bit different today. If you are interested in anything I used, it's all going to be linked down in the description box below. And if you enjoy my videos, don't forget to subscribe. Happy crafting, everyone!